Final script. They threw me out 3 days before the first snow, claiming the old Hillside cabin Dad left me wasn't worth the gas to visit. What they didn't know was that beneath the rotting porch, sealed behind 2 feet of reinforced concrete and rust, was a fully stocked Cold War shelter. And inside it, proof that my father's death wasn't an accident, but a carefully orchestrated murder. The funeral was cold, not because of the weather, though November had already begun to bite, but because my stepmother Diane didn't cry. Not once. She stood at the graveside in a charcoal coat that probably cost more than my car, her hand resting on my half-brother Trevor's shoulder like she was posing for a portrait. I stood across from them, alone, still numb from the call I'd gotten 2 weeks earlier. Dad had died in his sleep. Heart failure. Sudden, the doctor said. Painless, Diane assured me. I didn't get to say goodbye. The will reading happened 4 days later in a glass-walled conference room that smelled like leather and old money. Diane sat across from me with Trevor beside her, his expression smug before the lawyer even opened the folder. I should have known then. I should have felt it coming. To my daughter Emma, the lawyer read, I leave the Hillside property in Maple Ridge, along with all structures and contents therein. Diane didn't even blink. Trevor laughed. Actually laughed. That's it, he said. The shack. The lawyer cleared his throat. The remainder of the estate, including the family home, investment portfolio, and business assets, are bequeathed to Diane Collier, with provisions for Trevor upon her passing. I felt the air leave the room. Wait, that can't be right. Diane folded her hands on the table. Her nails were perfect. Your father and I discussed this at length, Emma. You've always been independent. He thought the cabin would suit you. It's a dump, Trevor added. No water, no heat. You'll probably freeze. I looked at the lawyer. He wouldn't meet my eyes. Was this recent? The will. Executed 8 months ago, he said quietly. 8 months. Right after I confronted Dad about Diane's spending. Right after I'd asked why he looked so tired all the time. Why his hands shook when he poured his coffee. Right after I'd suggested he see a different doctor. Diane stood. If there's nothing else, we have arrangements to finalize. Arrangements? I said. He's already buried. She smiled. It didn't reach her eyes. Estate arrangements, Emma. You're welcome to visit the cabin whenever you like. I believe the key is in your father's desk. Or what's left of it, Trevor muttered. They left me sitting there, alone, staring at a single line on a legal document that had just severed me from everything I thought I'd have. Not the money. I'd never cared about the money. But the house where I grew up. The workshop where Dad taught me to sand wood and fix engines. The proof that I'd mattered to him. Gone. I moved out that weekend. Diane didn't ask me to, but the house didn't feel like mine anymore. Every room smelled like her perfume. Every surface had been rearranged. I packed my car with clothes, my laptop, a box of Dad's tools I'd taken from the garage before Trevor could trash them, and the old cabin key I'd found taped inside his desk drawer. There was a note with it, written in Dad's shaky handwriting. Asterisk, Emma, sometimes the best things are buried. Remember what I told you about patience. Asterisk, I'd heard that line 100 times growing up. Patience, Emma. Good things take time. I used to roll my eyes. Now I just felt hollow. The drive to Maple Ridge took 4 hours. The roads got narrower as I climbed into the hills, the trees closing in like walls. By the time I reached the turnoff, the sky had turned the color of slate, and the first flakes were starting to fall. The driveway was barely visible, choked with weeds and fallen branches. I had to get out twice to move deadwood out of the way. The cabin sat at the end of a gravel clearing, perched on the slope of a hill that overlooked a valley I could barely see through the trees. It was worse than I remembered. The roof sagged in the middle. The windows were dark and cracked. The porch listed to one side, boards rotted through in places. The whole structure looked like it might collapse if I sneezed. I sat in the car for a long time, engine running, heat on full blast, and try not to cry. This was it. This was what I was worth to my father. I turned off the engine. Inside, the cabin smelled like mildew and mouse droppings. There was a wood stove in the corner, rusted and cold. A table with 2 chairs, one missing a leg. A narrow bed frame with no mattress. The walls were bare wood, water-stained and splitting. The back window was broken, covered with a trash bag and duct tape that had peeled away in the corners. I dropped my bag on the floor and sat on the edge of the bed frame. The sun was setting. I had no heat, no running water, and about $200 in my bank account. My phone had 1 bar of signal. The nearest town was 10 miles back down the mountain. I pulled out my phone and called the only person I could think of, my best friend Lauren. She didn't pick up. I tried again. Voicemail. Hey, I said, keeping my voice steady. I'm at the cabin. It's bad. Call me when you can. She didn't call back that night. I spent the first week trying not to fall apart. I patched the window with a tarp I found in the shed. I got the stove working with what I chopped myself, blisters forming on my palms, even through Dad's old work gloves. I boiled water from a creek 100 yards down the hill and ate canned soup I bought at a gas station on the way up. The cold came fast. By the third night, the temperature inside the cabin barely crept above freezing, even with the stove going full blast. I tried calling Diane once. I didn't beg. I just asked if there was anything else Dad had left, any account I didn't know about, any mistake in the will. She hung up on me. Trevor sent me a text 2 days later. Asterisk, enjoy the view. Asterisk, I blocked his number. The town of Maple Ridge wasn't much. A diner, a hardware store, a post office, and a bar that looked like it hadn't changed since the 70s. The first time I went in for supplies, the guy at the counter of the hardware store looked at me like I crawled out of the woods. You're staying up at the Collier place, he said. Not a question. Yeah, he grunted. That cabin's been empty 20 years. I know, your dad never came up here. Not once. I didn't know what to say to that, so I paid for the nails and left. But he was right. Dad had never taken me to the cabin. He'd mentioned it once or twice when I was a kid, some property his own father had bought in the 50s, back when land was cheap and people thought the world might end. I'd assumed it was sold off years ago. I never thought to ask. On the 8th day, the snow came for real. It started in the afternoon, light and harmless, but by nightfall it was coming down in sheets. I woke up the next morning to 2 feet of it piled against the door. The road was gone. The car was buried. I was alone on a hill in the middle of nowhere with a wood stove, 3 cans of beans, and no way out. I should have panicked. Instead, I got angry. I started tearing the place apart. Not out of rage, out of logic. Dad wouldn't have left me this place for no reason. He wouldn't have written that note about patience if there wasn't something here. I went through every drawer, every cabinet, every corner. I found nothing. Old newspapers, rusted nails, a deck of cards so warped they wouldn't shuffle. Then I went outside. The shed was half collapsed, but I forced the door open and found an old toolbox, a coil of chain, and a folded piece of oilcloth wrapped around something heavy. I brought it inside and unwrapped it by the stove. It was a blueprint, old, brittle, stamped with a date, 1959. It showed the cabin, the hill, the slope of the land, and beneath it, drawn in fading blue ink, a rectangular outline labeled asterisk shelter access, north porch. Asterisk. My hands were shaking. I went back outside, cleared snow off the north side of the porch, and started pulling up boards. Most of them were rotten and came away easy. Underneath, instead of dirt, there was concrete. Smooth, poured concrete with a seam running down the middle. And in the center of the seam, a rusted metal handle. I pulled. It didn't budge. I hit it with a hammer, pried at it with a crowbar, and finally, on the 4th try, it gave. The hatch opened with a groan that sounded like a scream. Below was darkness, a ladder, and the smell of stale air that hadn't moved in decades. I climbed down. The shelter was bigger than the cabin. The walls were cinder block, painted white, lit by a single bulb that flickered when I pulled the chain. There were metal shelves lining both sides, stocked with canned food, bottled water, medical supplies, batteries, blankets, all of it preserved, labeled, dated. Enough to last months, maybe longer, but it wasn't the food that made me stop breathing. It was the desk at the far end of the room, and on it a lockbox, and beside the lockbox, a letter with my name on it. I sat down. My legs wouldn't hold me anymore. The letter was in Dad's handwriting. Steady, clear, nothing like the shaky scrawl he'd used in his last years. Emma, asterisk if you're reading this, I'm gone. And if Diane gave you this property, it means she thought it was worthless. She was wrong. Asterisk. Asterisk, I built this shelter with my father in 1959. We stocked it, sealed it, and told no one. It was our insurance. Our secret. When he died, he made me promise to keep it hidden until I needed it. I never did, but I knew you might. Asterisk. Asterisk, I didn't die of heart failure, Emma. I was poisoned. Slowly, carefully. I started noticing 6 months ago. The tremors, the fog, the exhaustion. I had my blood tested privately. Arsenic. Trace amounts. Enough to kill me over time without suspicion. Asterisk. Asterisk, I couldn't prove it. I couldn't risk confronting her. So I changed my will. I made sure you'd get this place. I made sure you'd find this. Asterisk. Asterisk in a lockbox is everything you need. Bank records, recordings, emails, proof that Diane's been siphoning money from my accounts for 2 years. Proof she's tied to a man named Paul Vickers, a con artist, a forger, and her real partner. They planned this together. Asterisk. Asterisk, I'm sorry I couldn't protect you from her, but I can give you the tools to fight back. Asterisk. Asterisk, be patient, Emma. Be smart. Asterisk. I love you. Asterisk, Dad. Asterisk. I read it 3 times. Then I opened the lockbox. Inside were USB drives, file folders, printed emails, photos of Diane with a man I didn't recognize, tall, silver-haired, smiling. Bank statements showing transfers to offshore accounts. Recordings labeled by date of phone calls where Diane and Paul discussed dosage, timing, and what they'd do with the estate once Dad was gone. My father had been murdered, and he'd known it was coming. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I climbed back up the ladder, closed the hatch, and pulled out my phone. 1 bar. Barely. I called the one person I thought might listen. A reporter named Sarah Gahn who'd done a story on financial fraud in estate cases a year ago. I'd read it in college. She was based 2 hours south in the city. She picked up on the 3rd ring. This is Sarah. My name is Emma Collier. I said, my father was murdered for his estate, and I can prove it. There was a pause. Then, I'm listening. I told her everything. She didn't interrupt. When I finished, she said, I need to see the documents. Can you get to me? I'm snowed in. Then I'm coming to you. Send me the address. She arrived 2 days later in a Jeep with snow chains and a camera bag. She was younger than I expected, maybe 30, with short dark hair and the kind of eyes that didn't miss anything. I brought her down into the shelter. She photographed everything. She listened to the recordings. She took notes in a battered notebook that looked like it had survived a war. This is enough, she said quietly. More than enough. What do I do? You let me run the story. But we do it smart. If Diane finds out you have this before it goes public, she'll come after you. Or send Vickers. She doesn't even know about this place. Sarah looked at me. You sure about that? I wasn't. That night, I heard an engine. It was past midnight. The snow had stopped, but the sky was black and the only light came from the stove inside the cabin. I'd been reviewing documents, copying files onto Sarah's external drive, when I heard it, low, distant, growing closer. Headlights swept through the trees. I killed the lantern, grabbed the crowbar, watched through the broken window as a black SUV pulled into the clearing and stopped 20 feet from the cabin. 2 people got out. Diane, in a long coat and boots, and a man I recognized from the photos. Paul Vickers. She didn't knock. She just stood there, hands in her pockets, staring at the cabin like she owned it. Emma, she called. I know you're in there. I didn't move. We need to talk, she continued. About your father. About what he left you. Paul circled around the side, boots crunching in the snow. He was looking for another way in. I climbed down into the shelter and locked the hatch from below. I heard them enter the cabin. Footsteps. Voices. Diane's heels on the wood floor. She's not here, Paul said. Her car's buried outside. She's here. Then where? A pause. Then Diane's voice, colder now. Check the shed. Check everything. I sat in the dark below, heart slamming, phone in my hand. 1 bar. I texted Sarah. Asterisk, they're here. Diane and Vickers. Shelter locked. Need help. Asterisk. She replied in seconds. Asterisk, stay down. I'm calling the police. 20 minutes. Asterisk. 20 minutes felt like hours. I heard them stomping around above, opening doors, kicking through debris. Then Paul's voice louder. There's a hatch under the porch. My blood went cold. Open it, Diane said. I heard metal scraping. The hatch groaned. It's locked from inside, Paul said. Diane laughed. It was sharp, humorless. She's down there. A bang. He was hitting the hatch with something. I looked around. There was a second exit, a vent shaft, narrow, built into the back wall. I'd seen it on the blueprint. It was meant for air circulation, but it led up to the hillside behind the cabin. I grabbed the files, stuffed them into my jacket, and started climbing. The shaft was tight, freezing, lined with dirt and ice. I had to pull myself up with my arms, feet slipping on the metal rungs. Behind me, I heard the hatch give way. A crash. Diane's voice echoing down into the shelter. Emma. I kept climbing. I came out on the hillside, 50 feet above the cabin, gasping, covered in dirt. I could see the SUV below, see Paul standing on the porch, shining a flashlight down into the shelter. See Diane pacing, phone to her ear. I ran. I didn't know where I was going. Just away. Into the trees, down the slope, snow up to my knees. My lungs burned. My hands were numb, but I didn't stop. I heard shouts behind me, an engine revving. Then, ahead of me, through the trees, flashing red and blue lights. 2 police cars skidded to a stop on the access road. Officers stepped out, hands on the belts. Sarah got out of the passenger seat of the lead car, pointing up the hill. I stumbled toward them, gasping. They're up there. Diane Collier and Paul Vickers. They killed my father. The officers didn't hesitate. They moved up the hill fast, lights cutting through the trees. I followed, legs shaking. By the time we reached the clearing, Diane was standing beside the SUV, arms crossed, face smooth as glass. Paul was leaning against the hood, hands in his pockets, smiling. Officers, Diane said. Thank God you're here. My stepdaughter has been making wild accusations. We came to check on her, and she attacked us. One of the officers looked at me. I was covered in dirt, shaking wild-eyed. I pulled the USB drive from my jacket and held it up. Everything's on here. Bank records, recordings, proof she poisoned my father, proof they planned it together. Paul's smile faltered. Diane didn't blink. She's delusional. Grief does terrible things. Then you won't mind coming down to the station, the officer said. I absolutely mind, Diane said. This is harassment. Ma'am, we've been briefed. We have a warrant for your arrest, pending review of evidence. You can come voluntarily, or we can make it official right now. Her mask cracked. Just a little. Just enough. Paul bolted. He made it 10 feet before the second officer tackled him into the snow. Diane didn't run. She just stood there, staring at me with something close to hate. You have no idea what you've done, she said. Yeah, I said. I do. They arrested her on the spot. Paul, too. The recordings were damning. Diane's voice, cold and clear, discussing dosage and timing. The bank records showed 2 years of systematic theft. The emails tied her to Vickers, a man with 3 prior fraud convictions under different names. The story broke 4 days later. Sarah's article went viral. National outlets picked it up. Diane's face was everywhere. The estate was frozen. The will was contested. Within 2 weeks, a judge ruled it invalid, signed under duress and undue influence. Everything came back to me. The house, the accounts, the business. But I didn't move back into the house. I sold it, took the money, and bought the Hillside property outright, expanded it, rebuilt the cabin into something warm and solid. I turned the shelter into a secure archive, preserving everything Dad had left me. I visit his grave every month. I bring flowers. I tell him I understood the lesson. Patience. Good things take time. And sometimes the best things are buried. If this story moved you, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories of justice, betrayal, and hidden truths. Drop a comment if you've ever uncovered a family secret that changed everything. Thanks for watching.